I grew up in Atlanta, so I'm back in my hometown these days and moved back here in 2012 and grew up in a family of a lot of Gamecock fans. So we all went to South Carolina. I had 15 relatives precede me in Columbia and grew up a Gamecock fan. And then when I reached my adult years, I realized just how challenging it can be a Gamecock fan. It requires great humility. Steve Spurrier took us places where we had never gone before, and then he bailed on us. So it's a life that's full of challenges. But I've always grown up playing sports in Atlanta and kids around the neighborhood and with dad. My dad was a football player at Carolina, and my mom was a cheerleader at Carolina, so they had a storybook romance. And then when I interned at this small fledgling cable network called CNN, way back in its second year of operation, I got an internship and I watched the likes of Fred Hickman and Nick Charles and Jim Huber and Craig Sager and Gary Miller and, you know, Hannah Storm, Dan Hicks. A lot of quality talent came out of that CNN sports team. But when I saw those guys getting paid to be on camera and talk about sports and then spend their other time during their work shift just watching games. The first day I walked into CNN Sports and there's 10 monitors up there on the wall recording all the games. I mean, that was heaven. And that was really before sports bars really took off, where you would have multiple televisions. I keep showing my age, but I'm going to try to avoid that as we continue to talk, right? But during that internship, I asked one of the producers, I want to have that job. And they're like, okay, well, we'll see you in about 5 years. I'm like, what do you mean? I said, you're not getting that job. First, you sound like a total redneck growing up in Atlanta with your strong Southern dialect. And two, you have no idea how to do it. So I paid some dues with 5 years of small market television, and that was one of the best things that I ever did in my career because I made my mistakes. I made a fool of myself. I, threw up all over myself on set during a sportscast, but it was in Tupelo, Mississippi, and in Beaumont, Texas, and in Charleston, South Carolina, where that level of broadcasting expertise doesn't really have a high level. It's a small market. But since I interned at CNN, I kept sending them tapes, and they finally hired me and spent 3 years there, and then went to Detroit to work at the NBC affiliate as a sports director, and then went out to Los Angeles and spent 12 years working in various roles at Fox Sports.
So when you made that decision, I want to be that guy that I'm seeing over there. Now, if I remember correctly, at that point, as you said, we had the nightly news, we had ESPN Sports Center, and then there comes this, as you saw, is Fred Hickman and Nick Charles. I got to the point where I said, I'd rather watch these guys.
Right.
They look like they're having fun.
Exactly.
And they're knowledgeable.
I agree with that, and Fred Hickman was a big part of that. He would always look for opportunities to laugh and not take the subject matter so seriously when the subject matter is just a bunch of highlights. When you've got stories that are important, then he certainly had the journalistic skills to do that, as did all those other guys I mentioned. And that was also at a time when CNN, believe it or not, CNN was the focus of the entire network, was to be objective and to show the journalism and let the viewer decide. And we've all seen what CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News have developed into. It's the poorest example of journalism because it's all three of them are guilty of being so biased. And it's such a disappointment to me because I knew, reading Ted Turner's biography and so many other things about Ted Turner, his vision was to create a pillar of journalism that was available 24 hours a day. And to see what it has become is quite discouraging, and certainly makes me sad, because Ted has always been one of my heroes. He was a maverick. He was just way ahead of his time, thinking about putting the Braves on a satellite so they could be America's team.
Right.
I mean, putting his little independent station, Channel 17 in Atlanta, and turning it into the superstation that is TBS.
Superstation, right.
It was just remarkable. And he won an America's Cup, and he gave so much of his money to environmental groups, and he put his money where his mouth was, and always been one of my heroes.
Well, it changed, to me, the landscape of sports, and as you said, of news. 24-hour news. Who would have thought of that? Like we said, you got the nightly news, and then you got the morning news, and then if it happened at 3:00 in the afternoon, you weren't going to know about it until 6 or 7.
And that's what Ted mentioned in his book. He's like, I'm not home at 6:30. I'm working my butt off trying to make this independent station profitable after inheriting a billboard business from his father. And you're like, I'm working till 8 or 9 at night. I'm not able to see the national news. Well, okay, well, he solved that problem.
Right. And the same thing with the sports was, okay, it wasn't just highlights. Again, you mentioned Jim Huber. It was, here's a story that you want to follow, because we're going to make it so you want to follow it. And
they knew they were some of the best and first storytellers, at least for sports, in broadcasting. And that was the one thing that they told me when I was both interning and when I first started there. Your writing is the most important part of your job. Write in a way that's easy for the viewer to comprehend. Don't try to impress them with big words. Just speak and write conversationally. And of course, when I got the job at Headline Sports, I received a lot of criticism myself, or while I was writing, I was also adding an energetic presentation.
Right.
2-minute sports reports.
But that's part of who you are.
In my opinion, you've got to communicate the facts, and then I chose to do it in a little bit different way, a little bit more fun way, in my opinion.
So now, how does that carry over for you going from there to Detroit to Los Angeles? You go from being local to national to local again.
Yeah, and
how's that transition?
That was one of the concerns that I had about leaving that national platform that was developing in the early 90s into an international platform. In fact, I would receive mail from members of the military who were able to get the CNN worldwide signal, again, because of Ted's utilization of satellites. And that was quite thrilling to receive mail from members of the military who said that they enjoyed the work and, felt really connected to home. That was quite rewarding. But money does matter. So Ted didn't pay his employees a whole lot. So I was making $40,000, and the NBC affiliate in Detroit was offering me $180,000. So I was like, well, that's a top 10 market, and they got great sports, and they got great sports history, and I really like the sound of that number. So and it was a chance for me to be the number one Monday through Friday sports guy, and I was a little leery about Detroit because at that time, it didn't have the greatest reputation. The last 5 years, they've done a great job of improving the downtown area of Detroit. But it was so much fun to be in a top 10 market where the audience truly cared about sports. Detroit is one of the most underrated sports towns in America and continues to be. But man, the passion that the citizens of Detroit and the rest of Michigan has for sports, fell in love with hockey. It was a fantastic experience.
So you're there during the Red Wings heyday, the Pistons evolving, that kind of thing.
Right there when the Red Wings were starting kick it in, and they hired Scotty Bowman, the legendary NHL coach who had won multiple cups. And Stevie Yzerman was the captain, and he was fantastic. And he's continued to be a fantastic general manager, even though he's rebuilding in Detroit. But he did a great job as the GM in Tampa. And but it was really just the people of Detroit and Michigan, just really genuine people who love their sports, and that was the most enjoyable part, I think.
All right, so then we go to LA, which
we went out to LA, and when I first moved out there, I was thinking I wouldn't mind. It'd be kind of cool to get a job for ET, Entertainment Tonight, and then I had an opportunity, excuse me, to work for the regional sports network in LA briefly. And then I also worked at KCBS with Jim Hill. I did the weekend sports for them. And then the Fox Sports Cable, the Fox Sports Net group, decided to go national with a nightly sportscast and challenge ESPN. And we had we would do 4 hours every night from 7 to 11, different anchor teams every hour. And that too was just a blast, because just like you've described in your bio on LinkedIn and on your website, you know, the passion, you're sitting there and getting paid to watch games with a bunch of other guys, and you got to do your work, and you got to write, and you got to watch closely. But that was a lot of fun, and that evolved into returning to the regional sports report, Southern California sports report, where we were covering the Lakers and the Clippers and the Angels and the Dodgers and the Kings and the Ducks. Didn't have the NFL at the time. And being in that city and doing a Dodger pregame show and then tossing to Vin Scully. I mean, just the fact that I could be that closely associated with Vin Scully was that provided a lot of thrills too.
Now, when this is happening, and I know we're talking about it in historical sense now, do you realize how many different things you're on the cutting edge of, or is it just a progression of how you're doing things?
When I first started using a more energetic style, it could be an understatement, but an energetic style at CNN Headline Sports, I was doing that because when I watch sports, you know, it's exciting to me. And when you got a great Michael Jordan jam or a grand slam or a crucial play that decides a game, that's exciting. And I would translate that into the 2-minute sportscast, and I wasn't going to be a monotone guy. And so I was having fun with it. It was quite puzzling to the bosses at the time, but the big boss said, "Well, I'm not quite sure what you're doing on air, but you're the second most generator of mail to CNN behind Larry King." And I was like, "Wow, okay." But I knew firsthand it was not all complimentary email. There was a lot of hate mail. But you know, that I guess I was just blessed with the personality of learning that you cannot please everybody, and just stick to what you're doing.
Well, and that old adage, even bad publicity is publicity. So
That's right.
You know, at least someone's paying attention to you. So that's always something. So, well, when you say now, I want to make a transition from in front of the camera to behind the camera and doing other things behind the scenes. Is that an easy thing to do, or is that like, I've had enough of this part, let's try this part?
Well, it was, I made the transition to behind the camera pretty quickly after I moved to Atlanta. I did do some freelance work of announcing the highlights down at Turner Sports for NBA and NCAA.com. It was interesting because it had come full circle. From doing the 2-minute reports on CNN Headline Sports on cable, I was doing I was doing game highlights on the internet. So it was kind of interesting how that came full circle. But the producing at a local station here, WSB, the ABC affiliate, and they have a weekly show that covers UGA athletics, University of Georgia. And that has been a fun new skill to learn because I enjoy organizing, I enjoy planning, and it was a rather toxic environment when I started working on that show. The former producer left, and I had the opportunity to improve the relationships both within the station and with our client, UGA, and that proved to be very satisfying, and also to utilize skills that had not really been used so much when you were just doing the on-air work.
Right. Well, you mentioned something when you started, and I think I'm starting to see a little bit of a pattern here. You talk about being a South Carolina grad and all of that, and I look at the thing that stands out to me when I'm thinking around that time is George Rogers.
George Rogers.
So
yes.
You go from having that figurehead of a program, and then we get to Steve Spurrier later. But it's the idea of, okay, can you build something around one person?
No.
No. But what? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Carolina proved you cannot build a program around one person. Rogers won the Heisman my freshman year. What a thrill that was. And like all Gamecock fans, boy, we're off and running now. And then we went through some rather no-name coaches, hired Lou Holtz, who was going to help us end our 20-game winning streak. He brought some national publicity, but he didn't have a whole lot of success. But he was the guy who convinced Spurrier, who had just been asked to leave D.C. after his brief stint as a Redskin coach. And Holtz is the one who put Carolina and Spurrier together. And as I mentioned, he led us places we'd never been before.
Well, the reason and the reason I asked that is because you go from, and I kind of figured it was about the first few years you were in college, that you see that, and then you go to CNN and these other things. You keep talking about all the other people who've either mentored you or they brought you along, and it's the thing of it's a team. You have to do this as a group of people.
And it's so much fun to work in a team environment. And you can imagine the antics that might have gone on at CNN when it was really competing with SportsCenter. And Nick and Fred were there. And then when I was there, I was working, as I mentioned, with Dan Hicks and Vince Cellini and Hannah Storm and Mike Galanos, who's gone on to HLN, which is what they call it now. And so there was a lot of talent in there. And again, you got 10 monitors on the wall, and we're all checking out the games. It was a lot of fun. And we were also working without ego. There really, of all those on-air people, there really wasn't a person who tried to separate himself from the team and try to make himself more important than anybody else. And that is such a positive environment in which to work.
And also we're looking at that point of what we saw on TV. You had a non-homogenous, group of people,
Right.
that you would just say, whoa, it represented real life. These are the people that you go to the games to see, or you go to a game and this guy's sitting over here and that lady's sitting over there and that guy's sitting behind you. That's what it felt like to me. It's just like we watched, like you said, we watched the bank of games, and now we're going to talk about them.
That's right. Well, I agree. If that's the feeling that you had watching, you were right on, because that's what the feeling was. I mean, for a group of, 15, 20 people who had the same day off, or, we'd go to afternoon Braves game. I mean, that doesn't really happen in a lot of workplaces. Everybody kind of goes their own way. Granted, we were all of similar age and similar circumstances. None of us were making a lot of money, so we'd chip in. And but to do those activities outside of the workplace said a lot about our team environment.
Okay, now I know people don't ask this question of broadcasters or people that often. Favorite sport?
College football. When I was in Detroit, I fell in love with hockey, and it was a good time because the Red Wings were on their way and getting better every year before winning the cup. But nowadays, it's college football. I'm still going to watch pro football, but you know, the passion and growing up in the South in the SEC it's
right.
Well, you know how intense it is being a Buckeye, so it's
Right.
pretty intense. But it's fun.
Well,
it's intensely fun.
Well, I mentioned that the Ohio State fans are probably the most obnoxious people in the world, but in a good way.
Oh, yeah? Well, what's the good way? I'm just kidding.
Well, well, that comes from me. I don't know about anybody else sees it that way, but that's the way I see it. I mean, we actually do, and I don't know whether we've been brainwashed or not, but when you mention it, you really do have to say the Ohio State University, because now you've been brainwashed to do that. And when you say it, sometimes you catch yourself going, did I just say that? Okay. You know, but it's kind of weird. Now, we're talking college football then and I'm not as you said, we deliver the news and we deliver what's there. So the opinion of us doesn't really matter as much, I don't think. But when we're in the pandemic where we're at right now, what do you think about play, no play? What's going on? How do we do what we do? How do we get through it? Is there anything that we see that is really relevant, or is it just let's just get through it and move on? Because I have a couple of thoughts on how we're attempting to get through it, and some things I like, some things I don't.
There's a lot of points to consider, in my opinion, for the Big Ten, and considering it's a first-year commissioner and Kevin Warren. I thought he was premature, and the work done by SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey, in my opinion, has been very impressive. He has not succumbed to any pressure to make any announcements, to make any decisions. He is truly trying to wait to the very last minute to make monumental decisions. And he has also consistently said that I'm relying on scientists and medical experts. I'm going to follow the science. And I don't see really any other better formula to have than what Commissioner Sankey has been using throughout this. And I'm still not convinced there will be a full season, but I do believe that players at their respective universities are in a much safer environment than they would be at their respective homes. And that's not to say that college athletes who might come from lower income homes, I'm not saying that about any specific athlete. I'm talking about the kid from the wealthiest family in the neighborhood to the kid who's coming from a low income household. All of them are safer, in my opinion, in the bubble which they currently reside on their campuses, because they are getting tested consistently, and the protocols are very strict because they want to play. So do the coaches, and the university budget wants them to play too.
Right. Oh yeah. So the dichotomy of it is that they are safer, but the question is, should they be safer? Because now we're looking at, why are they better off than the rest of the universities, than the rest of the students? And should they be, or is there something that the rest of the university can adapt to say, if you're an engineering major, why are you more at risk than you are if you're a soccer player?
100% valid point. And my cold, hard answer is the players are safer because they produce a whole lot of revenue. In fact, they fund the entire athletic department. And they're going to do, it's an investment of sorts for them to reward an athlete a scholarship and they are doing everything they can to protect that investment. I have read these articles where this is an opportunity for college, specifically college football players, to unionize and gain some more protection where they can be compensated more, since they are the number 1, 2, 3, 10th most productive programs when it comes to revenue. And I'm all for that as well, but I don't think that that's the number one issue right now. It could be a future benefit for college athletes, but right now it's about avoiding positive tests. I don't know how. It's just going to be so difficult in a sport like football, where you're sweating and you're bleeding and you're breathing all over everybody and everything. And, you know, I've read where they're going to be required to wear masks. All the non-participants are going to have to be wearing masks on the sidelines. I mean, it's hard to imagine Coach O or Saban or Kirby Smart or Muschamp screaming through a face mask. But,
through a face mask, right.
Maybe the head coaches will not have to wear one. I don't know, but I just can't help but think that there are going to be a lot more positive tests when the contact begins.
Well, it's something I mentioned on another show that we did about a month or so ago, that there's going to be revolutionary change from all of this, but especially for sport. Now, you know, we remember a few years ago where we had MRSA and the staph infections and all that. We had to change how we did things then because they couldn't get a handle on it. I think it was it in New Orleans? They just couldn't get a handle on that for a while, and everyone was getting ill. And they finally got it cleaned up because they decided this is what we have to do. So this may be the next revolutionary change. And I know we're going to see things odd come out of this or different come out of this. But like you said, that's not the salient point right now. But it will be down the road. How do we fix what 3 months ago was unfixable?
Correct. Well, nobody has more ingenuity than America does. And I think that we have the best medical experts in the world, or certainly as good as anyone else around the world. Some are more cautious, some are not as cautious. But we're all, I hope, going to adopt the changes to our daily lives and make them part of our lives in the future, with respect for people's space, courtesy about, you know, doesn't mean you can talk face to face anymore. And I mean, you know, really nose to nose. I found it kind of humorous when watching one of the baseball games after they started up, and the umpire goes out to argue, and he's putting on his mask on his way to the umpire. You know, as heated as those verbal exchanges become, I'm not sure they might have to wear 3 masks. But
that's one of those you're looking. Well, what would have happened if that had been Earl Weaver? You know, there's he would have like had 9 masks on. Yeah.
I think Earl would have had to retire. The other thing that I had the thought of is, I've been so impressed by the NBA and the terrific leadership Adam Silver has provided that organization. And it certainly seems to me the players believe and are convinced that they need to do everything they can to follow proper protocol. And they're you know, it's been wildly successful in my opinion, but they've been in that bubble. So how do you transfer people who are in Tuscaloosa to Baton Rouge or Gainesville or Columbia? So
that's the thing. And I went on record saying when they were going to start with the NBA, I said, this will never work, because how are you going to keep them in the bubble? Not just them, but who's doing the laundry, who's bringing the food. I mean, all these other factors that I'm sure I know I haven't thought of, but that go into that, but they figured it out. But as you said, you know, now do we have to play all of our games in Baton Rouge?
Right.
Do we have to set up a bubble system where it's, you know, the SEC is played at 3 different places, someplace on turf, so you can do 3 games a day, you know?
Right.
some on Saturday, some on Sunday, some on Monday. And my question from that has always been, we've got the student athlete part of it as well. You know, where does the student part come in if you just said, now you're an athlete and we're going to put you over here for 2 months?
I believe it, again, it was all money based. The presidents and the athletic directors knew that they couldn't allow their student athlete football players on campus and not anyone else. So
Right.
they had to make sure we're going to try in-person learning, or at least have these students on campus and in dorms or whatever living arrangements they can find. I know that my two children who are going to Georgia Tech, they've begun a combination of online and in person, with the focus on labs, their lab work in person.
Okay.
And the focus of lecture halls not being utilized, but that would be online. Smaller classes, I think they're trying to make in person. So we'll just have to see, because nobody knows, man.
It is a whole new world. And I think that's what we see is it is different. It is, you know, it's not a finished product. And I think what we see from sport, and I'll wrap it up this way, that we see from sport. I'm a former coach and athletic director as well. And what you would tell your kids if they were having a good day, a bad day, a good season, a bad season, whatever, it's like, you're not a finished product.
Right.
It's nice to think you are, but you're not. And the world we live in isn't finished either. So, you know, it could be great that we get it figured out today, but that doesn't mean we have it figured out tomorrow. Or that we figure it out tomorrow and we had to figure it out today. I mean, it's a full circle. So
the evolution of life, man, that's what we're living through every day, whether there's a pandemic or not. Well, the evolution of relationships, race relations. Have we made progress? I think we've definitely increased awareness, but I don't know how much progress we've made, because it's hard to make a lot of progress since the terrible incident that George Floyd, since that terrible witnessing, videotaping of a murder actually taking place in front of our eyes. Yes, that has raised awareness. Will it lead to substantial and permanent change? That's going to take a lot longer, in my opinion.
Well, if you look at it, unfortunately. Well, if we look at, I mean, I would have thought the seminal moment would have been, and we would have fixed things from there, Rodney King.
Oh my goodness, no kidding. Yeah. I mean,
right. How can we go back to that again?
That video is so horrific to watch. And that was 92?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 92, at least I'm pretty sure. Yeah, because the riots were in 92, of course. So that was inexplicable and 101% horrifying. And then you see the George Floyd thing, and there's other cops just standing around not doing anything. It's
right. And it makes you think, okay, are we going to go another 20-some years and we're going to have another thing that sets the fire again? Or are we going to come up with a way of fixing things? Because it shouldn't be all that hard to resolve.
You'd think.
Yeah.
But, we are so much more, I think as a country, we're more educated. I believe that to be the case. But those emotions of fear and hate, as we all know, are learned emotions. And it's the culture in which a person grows up in that will obviously determine their points of view and their feelings. But the fact that we witnessed what happened to Rodney King in 92, and here it is happening again in 2020, 28 years later. That's the discouraging part. It is my hope that we have begun to walk a new path and a new direction. but we've got to sustain it, and we've got to build on the momentum of change from a terrible disaster.
Well, I think, and I'm going to forget where I heard it was a movie, I believe, that a person is intelligent and can make these kind of decisions to do the right thing, the rational thing. But as a group of people, persons are bright, people are not. It was, yes. I think, paraphrasing what I remember hearing. But we're creating a mob mentality, a group mentality for the things that we see and the things that we do, without thinking about how do you really feel about this, and then how do you react, and what you say or do, how does that affect others? We're parroting what other people, what other groups have said, and then when you do that, now you're just part of the mob. And it's the mob that's, I think, my personal opinion is the mob that is the problem, not the person that's the problem.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, the media coverage is just not journalistically sound.
Right.
And it fuels the hatred or fear of one group, that those feelings are opposite of another group. And the constant barrage of that non-objective reporting and lack of journalism principles, it's just so harmful to what we're trying to do and what is possible to do. And there is no doubt that media is an integral part, not only of our society, but an even bigger part in the tensions and divisions that we are now experiencing. And I
absolutely
been a part of media since college, and it's embarrassing and disgraceful, really, to see all the negativity that they are spewing every single minute of every day, and not even considering objective reporting and sound journalism values.
And it's to the point where there's a generation of people that don't even know that there's such a thing as objective reporting.
Yes,
there's a generation of people that don't even understand that hate is just a small option, you know, and that's what they're grown up with. And I feel very sorry for them, because that's how they think the norm is now. At least they might think that's what the norm is now, but that's what they're being shown.
Absolutely.
And I mean, if you don't like something, yell and scream about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're being bombarded with not just the big screen in their home or apartment, but the little screen in their hand.
Right.
And with Twitter and Facebook, and it's just exhausting. And they are just under a 100% bombardment of all these posts and opinions of hate and fear. It's just sad for me to witness.
Well, hopefully we get our sports back in a timely fashion. I don't want to rush things. And I know people have accused a lot of people saying, we need to have it when it's time to have it back. Yeah. When it's time to come back, when it's safe, let's get back what we want to have back. And then we can use that platform and the platform they're setting to make things better, you know. And even that, I think, sometimes has been a little divisive, but at least we're trying. So that's a good thing. So
at least the effort is being made by some, and hopefully more every day, to find ways to unite and to support each other and to get along with each other and respect each other, whether it's a totally different point of view. We all have our right to have our own point of view.
Well, I want to thank you. We're right at the time that we said we would be, which is rare for me to actually do what I said I was going to do. But and we mentioned off air that it was going to be, we would like to have a dialogue instead of just a how did you, which I really appreciate. So I want to thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope we can connect again and talk about some things that are, as we try to touch on some more meaningful things.
I appreciate the opportunity, Frank. Thank you so much for reaching out and inviting me to be on your program, and continued success with the efforts and the dialogue that you are sharing with others.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
All right.